Now, Turkey is in the news a great deal these days, and it seems to demand respect on the international stage. Well, that has to be earned, doesn't it? Massacre, genocide, we know of the Holocaust, of course. Between 1915 and, 1922, 1923, more than 1 million Armenians were slaughtered, murdered by the Turks, and this attempted genocide is still officially denied by the Turkish government. Simple as that, I believe. They will probably say that's not true, but they're wrong. My guest, Jerry Tutunjian, Armenian activist.
Sort of.
Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Let's go through the basics first of all, because, you know, it was that swine Hitler who said, who remembers the Armenians now? Correct. Just before he started to try and exterminate the Jews. And how many people do know of the Armenians? What happened? When did it happen? Give us the details.
Okay. It started in 1915, the big one. But there were some actions before that. There was a big massacre in 1896 by the Sultan Abdulhamid. 300,000 Armenians were killed. 1909, 1908, 30,000 were killed in the city of Adana. But the big one started on April 24th, 1915, when 2,000 Armenian intellectuals, priests, businessmen, the heads of the Armenian community were arrested one night. And they were taken to abandoned places back country, and they were eventually killed. And the community, which was spread all over Turkey, was headless, leaderless. Yes. Then they proceeded, the army proceeded to every Armenian community.
The Turkish army took in?
Yep. That's right. And they either killed or deported Armenians to the desert of Syria. And eventually, there were 2 million Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire then.
And the Ottoman Empire was the area controlled by Turkey at this period.
That's right. And the Armenians lived mostly in the eastern part of the country. Now it's known as Eastern Turkey, but that's historic Armenia.
Right.
And there were 2 million Armenians living there. 1.5 million were slaughtered.
So 1.5 million, because the official figures vary between 800,000 and 1.5. But you think 1.5 million
yes,
were murdered?
And I'm not the only one, according to International Association of Genocide Scholars.
Right.
That's
and we should emphasize, this is not to downplay anyone else's suffering, but during the Holocaust, the Germans are very sophisticated people. The Nazis had gas chambers and systematic murder. This, I assume, was by drowning, bayoneting, shooting.
And there were also caves in the Syrian desert where the Turkish soldiers shoved Armenians into the caves and set them on fire. It was sort of like gas tanks, like the concentration camp.
Men, women, children?
Everyone, yeah, including my grandparents. My father was only 7 years old at the time. He survived by pretending to be dead. And he roamed, wandered in the desert naked for days until he was found by Bedouins, and he was adopted by Bedouins. And he lived as a desert man, Bedouin, for 10 years until he decided to come back to his nation, Armenians, and he came.
1.5
and he was
million.
Rescued that way.
Right. So 1.5 million murdered out of 2 million.
That's right.
That's actually a higher percentage than the Jewish people suffered during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. And the other 500,000 spread out. I mean, they fled to Middle East and to Russian-occupied Armenia or the Caucasus. So right now, remember, 2 million in 1915. There are 40,000 admitted Armenians in Turkey left.
40,000.
And they hide their identity, they change their names. They would not admit you to the Armenians because they are afraid. Still, nearly 100 years later, they are afraid, let alone demand.
And this is a country that tells the rest of the world how to behave and condemns Israel for its treatment of Gaza and wants to be in the European community.
Yeah.
Now, the Turks respond. They officially deny this ever happened.
Yeah.
I think in France, for example, it's illegal, isn't it, to deny the Armenian Holocaust, and other countries too?
There are 30 countries which recognize the genocide of Armenians, including the Vatican, Russia, Sweden, Switzerland, 42 states in America recognize it, and Quebec, Ontario, BC and the Canadian government recognize it.
But we waited a bit of time, of course, because there were nuclear reactors we were selling and trade. And I have to condemn Israel, too, because for the longest time when Israel had a relationship with Turkey, it also didn't say anything about the Armenian massacre. I suspect that'll change in the next few years. The Turks say it was during the First World War because not all of it was, but it was during the First World War, and the Armenians as Christians rose up in alliance with the Russians, and the Russians were allied to the British and the French, fighting the Turks and the Germans and the Austrians, and so it was just a military defense against a rebellion.
That's absolute lie. Absolute lie. There were 250,000 Armenians in the Ottoman army fighting on behalf of the Ottomans. They even fought in the Gallipoli against the British on the side with Turks.
Fighting with the Turkish
along with
army.
Turks, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there were also Armenians on the Russian side because that part of Armenia was occupied by Russia.
Yeah.
So those Armenians had to be in the Russian army.
Of course.
So actually Armenians were fighting each other because they were on each side of the empire.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, once the Turks decided to exterminate all Armenians, all these soldiers, Armenian soldiers, were disarmed, taken again in the back country, and into labor camps, and then eventually eliminated.
Even though they'd fought for as Armenian Christians, they'd fought for Turkish Muslims in defense of Turkey, and they were still killed.
Yeah. I mean, the idea was very simple. They wanted to clean ethnically the country. They wanted a country of Turks only.
Okay. We must cover this issue again because we haven't got too much time left. But when Hitler said, who remembers the Armenians now? The grotesque nature of this is he was right. But how have the Turks been able to get away with this for so long?
Okay. A couple of things happened. Very soon after these events, Turkey allied with the West. Okay? And now it's a NATO ally, it's a valuable ally.
For the time being.
Right?
Yeah.
So the West had no interest in pushing Turkey into recognizing as an ally. On the other side, Armenia, present-day Armenia, which is only 20% of historic Armenia, the other 80% is Turkish-occupied. That 20% was part of the Soviet Union, and they were not allowed to say anything. So the Armenians who survived in the Middle East and elsewhere, they were orphans. They had no education, no resources. It took them a while to get in a position to stand up and demand justice.
I'm proud of the fact that I do speak out about Armenia. We're going to do this again. We will not let this go because this is an open wound in the morality of the world. And Turkey, they have to deal with Armenia, they have to deal with Kurdistan, they have to deal with their treatment of minorities, and then we'll listen perhaps to what they have to say. But we'll have you back, and thank you so much for your time.
May I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
Turkey has more journalists in prison than any country in the world. That includes China.
My golly.
There is still oppression, no freedom of the press, let alone talking about the genocide.
We'll have you back, I promise. You have my word.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.